All right, let's now get you some updates on the American presidential election, which may still be months away, but the contest seems to be already hotting up. With presidential primaries underway and a 2020 general election rematch seemingly the most likely outcome, a new CNN poll shows former President Donald Trump narrowly ahead of President Joe Biden in what's shaping up to be a close contest nationally. This poll highlights voters' conflicted feelings about the leading candidates. Broad majorities of Democrats and Republicans say they would be satisfied if their party's candidate won such a rematch. Still, a sizable minority of voters express a desire for another option if Biden and Trump are the nominees. Overall, 49% of registered voters say they would bank Trump if an election between the two were held today, while 45% support Biden and 5% say they would vote for someone else. Since the polls conducted in fall, the demographic dynamics of the contest appear to be steady, with a wide education gap among the most notable demographic divides and smaller differences by age or race than in other recent presidential elections. Biden's support amongst traditionally Democratic-leaning blocs such as younger voters and voters of color has not grown since the fall. Voters younger than 35 remain about evenly split. 49% back Biden and 46% Trump, while voters of color back 57% Biden to 35% Trump. Most voters on both sides of the hypothetical matchup continue to be more likely to say their choice is about Trump than it is about Biden. 68% of Biden supporters say they would be voting against Trump rather than for Biden, while 60% of Trump supporters say they would be voting more for him than against Biden. A month into the election year, there are few signs of movement in how the public views either candidate. Both Trump and Biden continue to be deeply underwater in favorability ratings. 59% of Americans hold an unfavorable view of Biden and 55% have a negative take on Trump, and many say that Biden does not deserve re-election. That's 66%. Americans largely see Trump's views and policies as too extreme. That's 63%, while most see Biden's views and policies as generally mainstream, about 61%. The poll finds that a victory by either candidate would leave most of the nation dissatisfied and a substantial share of them upset. Voters in the poll were asked whether they would like to see another candidate from within the party that they're closest to run as an independent if Biden were the Democratic nominee and Trump the Republican. Among Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents, 43% say they would want to see another Democrat make an independent bid alongside a Biden-Trump matchup, while 40% of Republicans and Republican-leaning independents say they would want a Republican candidate to run as an independent in that scenario. Polling consistently shows that the idea of a third party or independent candidate for president is popular, but in reality, third-party bids rarely generate as much support as pre-election polling might suggest. The pull of party loyalty comes through in the poll's broad majorities, who say they would be content should their party's likely nominee win. Roughly 8 in 10 GOP-aligned voters say they would be satisfied or enthusiastic with another Trump presidency, and roughly 3/4 of Democratic-aligned voters are similarly positive about a second Biden term. Neither Biden nor Trump has locked in their party's nomination yet. Trump's last remaining major GOP opponent, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, holds a clear lead over Biden amongst voters nationwide in another hypothetical general election scenario. 52% support her compared with 39% for Biden. Voters' choices in that matchup are primarily motivated by views of Biden, with 63% of his supporters saying they back him more than they oppose her, while 63% of her supporters say it's more about opposing Biden than about backing her. Still, many Americans say they don't know enough about Nikki Haley to have an opinion of her. That's 42%. Those who do currently break more negative than positive, 32% unfavorable to 25% favorable. Haley trails Trump by roughly 50 points when Republican and Republican-leaning independent voters are asked who they would most like to see win the GOP nomination for president in 2024. 70% say Trump, 19% Haley, 8% name someone else. While most Democrats see Biden as having a realistic shot at winning a second term, 80% of Democratic-aligned voters say Most also see Trump as having a real shot at the White House, 61%, and a narrow majority say that Biden is not the candidate who brings the Democratic Party its best chance to win. In the new poll, 53% of Democratic and Democratic-leaning voters say their party has a better chance to win in 2024 with someone else at the top of the ticket. Democratic concerns about Biden remain concentrated around his age. Nearly half, that's 46%, cite his age when asked to name their biggest concern about him as a presidential candidate, with 5% mentioning his mental competence or sharpness, 2% citing worries about his ability to handle the job, and 2% worrying that he would not live through a second term. About 3% say it's not his age that concerns them personally, but ageism and how his age is perceived by others. And a new concern has emerged about Biden. 5% say his handling of the conflict between Israel and Hamas is their major concern. Democratic-aligned voters younger than 45 are more apt to name this as their top concern than our older voters.